Tuesday, September 17, the Crucifixion. Read Mark chapter 15, verses 21 to 38. What terrible and painful irony appears in these passages. Mark 15, beginning at verse 21. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it, and they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. At noon, darkness came over the whole land, until 3 p.m. And at 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. At this point in the Passion narrative, Jesus is a silent victim, controlled by people who are bent on his death. Throughout the Gospel, up to his arrest, he was the master of activities. Now he is acted upon. Though he was a robust itinerant preacher, the beating he had received, and the lack of food and sleep, wore him down to where a stranger had to bear his cross. At the cross, his garments were removed and became the property of the soldiers, who cast lots to see whose they would be. These words come from Psalm 22, verse 18. "They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment." Crucifixion was a fairly bloodless method of execution. The nails used to fasten a person to the cross were likely driven through the wrist below the palm, where no major blood vessels run. We read about these nails in John chapter 20, verses 24 to 29. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." In both Hebrew and Greek, the word for hand can refer to both the hand and the forearm. The palm of the hand itself does not have the structures necessary to carry the weight of the body in crucifixion. The median nerve runs through the centre of the forearm and would be crushed by the nails, causing excruciating pain up the arm. Breathing was difficult. To get a good breath, victims of crucifixion had to push against their nailed feet and flex their arms, again causing agonizing pain. Exhaustion asphyxia was one of the possible causes of death. Jesus received tremendous mockery and humiliation during his crucifixion. The Gospel of Mark has a revelation secrecy motif in which Jesus typically calls for silence about who he is. Consequently, such Christological titles as Lord, Son of God, or Christ do not appear often in the narrative. This element changes at the cross. He cannot be hidden. It is ironic that it is the religious leaders who use these titles in mocking Jesus. How these men are condemning themselves. One of their mocking statements stands out. In Mark 15, verse 31, they say, "He saved others, he cannot save himself." To make their point about his helplessness on the cross, they indicate that he did help others. The Greek verb can mean save, heal, or rescue. Thus, ironically, they admit he is the Saviour. The irony goes further. The reason he could not or would not save himself was because at the cross he was saving others. And so to finish today, read John chapter 1, verses 1 to 3, and then think about what this passage tells us about Jesus, the same Jesus who is being crucified here in Mark. How do we wrap our minds around what Christ's death means for us? John 1, beginning at verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. And you can listen and watch at the same time on YouTube. Remember, God is always faithful.